Hello, everyone, and happy Saturday. Welcome to another episode of One-on-One with Sam. I haven't done these in quite a bit, but I'm super excited to finally get to talk to Rosalie Michaels. I mean, I've been a fan of yours for quite a while now, and we were just off air talking a little bit about, just fangirling over each other a little bit, and I cannot tell you how happy I am to finally meet you in like a real sense and not just like a Twitter, chat.
Yeah. Well, in the real sense, this is the real sense these days, right? Everything is video conferencing. Everything is virtual. That's our engagement with people at this point, which quite honestly, I think it's really kind of upped the game instead of just, talking to people via Twitter or talking to people, via email or just having them watch on your shows. You get to actually engage with people. It's become a little bit more normal, and I love it.
Yeah, it's been really fun. And I mean, honestly, want to get to know you a little bit about how you've adapted during this pandemic. And obviously, everyone's lockdown per state has been different. But with your setup and the work that you do, have you found you've had to, completely change the game and what you do day to day? Or have you been able to adapt a bit easier than others?
Well, actually, it's pretty funny. So I do, a lot of work with DraftKings. I am the only female analyst that they have had for the past 3 years. And so for any of the sports, I only do football, but and we're seeing more and more women come into the analyst kind of role. So I love that. But I've been working with them for the past 3 years, and we actually used Zoom ahead of time anyway. That's how they do the show, The Sweat. And so it was there was no transition during this pandemic because I'm based in Phoenix. DraftKings is based out of Boston. And so all the production is based out of there. So they've actually had to adapt a little bit more than I have. I've been used to always coming to you live from my own personal home and office, which I love, because right after the show is done, I just hop over to my theater and start watching football. So it's fantastic. But yeah, so no adaptation really when it comes to the fantasy football aspect of my life.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think that, all of us have had to deal with so much this year. So having to not have to deal with one additional struggle as far as, the commuting, and at least you're still telecommuting in a way. So yeah. It's not been totally difficult for you, but that's been good. I feel like if anything, it's kind of forced everyone to, open up their doors, so to speak, to each other in the fantasy community because, not only were we kind of wondering if we were going to get a season or not, but wanting to have that connection together more. And I think that it's created opportunities for us to get to know each other better.
Yeah. I was invited into more leagues this season than I ever have. And I don't know if that's just, that I'm, engaging more with more people, but I actually had to turn down leagues this year because I am fully engaged in all of my leagues. I'm in 8 this season, and it's a lot. I mean, how many do you have?
I'm in 10, so I'm right there with you.
That's a lot. It really is.
So much.
I don't know about you, Sam, but I'm a competitive girl. Yeah. I love to win and I hate to lose. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, it's funny because there's a lot of my female friends that I kind of ask, like, how do you even get so into a sport like football? And I think it comes from this overall competitive nature. And if you are a competitive natured person that enjoys, friendly banter with friends in some sort of competition, whether it be something as simple as Pictionary with your friends to something as complicated as fantasy football, you are just so involved in this competitive spirit and getting to root for your team and then getting to make good calls. I love everything about it. So 10 leagues is a lot, but I don't know. I think once you're in that many, it's just like, yeah, one more, why not? It's just hard to say no. I got to say no more.
It is hard to say no. And I had said when I was at 5, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm not doing any more because I do want to really be fully engaged. I've seen some people in some of these leagues where you see they just let their team go. And I can't do that. I cannot, because it's still my name behind it. So I'm like, nope. got to be there. Got to make sure I'm active on the waiver wire. Make sure that I'm actively, putting the best lineup together that I possibly can.
Yeah.
And so I can't just neglect anything like that. But I do see some other people do, and maybe that's because they're in like 50 leagues and
yeah,
stuff.
no. It gets too much at that point when you're in that number of leagues. One of our co-hosts on Fantasy Focused, Ryan, he's in like 100 leagues, like legit like 100 leagues, and he's got spreadsheets to help him keep track. And I'm just like, I can't even get there. But is there like one league that maybe is a dynasty one, or one that you have with some friends that you've been in for a very long time?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's not with friends. I actually don't play fantasy football with any of my friends. It's all people that I work with in the fantasy community, and then people that I've met through the fantasy community on Twitter. But yeah, I don't play fantasy football with any friends or family or anything like that. Probably best, because as I said, I'm competitive, and I actually had a league. My husband is not huge into football, which a lot of people say, oh, you love football. You probably get this too. Oh, your significant other must love that. And I'm like, actually, he'd rather I'm out camping with him during the football season than home going, no, I can't go camping this weekend because I've got DraftKings on Sunday and I want to watch football all day on Sunday.
Yeah, right. I know. And I get that a lot too. I'm single, so I don't have to cater to another person, which I like. But I mean, when I have dated people, for some reason, I'd end up with guys that are not particularly into football, but they tend to be thoughtful enough to be like, oh, well, I'll watch a game with you. And that's nice. At least they're beside me. I remember I had one guy that I dated who, I wasn't with that weekend, and then he knew I'd be watching the game. So in the week, he asked me what I thought of the Jaguars game. And I looked at him and I was like, well, one, it was a game that I think, a throwaway game, but I was like, it's so sweet that you even watched a game, but like you picked the wrong one, and it's just like, he tried. That was thoughtful.
Did you give him the, oh, you tried?
I made the face, but I held it in because I was like, I can tell he really tried, and I was just like, oh yeah, did you see that? And he'd be like, yeah, I saw that play. And I'm like, oh, you tried, babe. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, it's so going back though. So my husband's not really into football, and I was actually in his work league, and so they knew it was me. And then when he said one year, he's like, you know what, I'd like to participate. I want to be a part of your world. So I'm like, great, take over that league. That'll be yours. And I would get so frustrated at him because I'm like, I told you to pick this guy off the waiver. Why did you not do that? Why did you start that guy instead of that guy? What is wrong with you? It became a point of contention instead of a point of connection.
I get that as well. I also hear that there's a lot of times where couples will be in leagues and they'll be playing against each other, and that either creates a bonding or an animosity. So I totally get that being a thing as well, especially like if they happen to do well and you're the one putting all the time and effort into the analysis behind the picks, and they get lucky on someone like Antonio Gibson going off one week and you're like, you don't even know what you're doing. But
no, that doesn't. Antonio Gibson, that I can understand. It's when, it's like, oh, I put this rando wide receiver in there because I don't know, I liked his name. And I'm like, that's not how you do this.
Yeah, right? It's like
sometimes it works.
Yeah, sometimes it works. You never know. That's why fantasy, is a love-hate sport, and all of us love it, but we hate those moments where we don't get to catch the lightning in a bottle. But yeah, I just wanted to get to know a little bit too, like your past with fantasy football. You have such a very colorful and amazing career of different sorts, from acting and pageants and all these things. You have so many things and facets to you that make you amazing and wonderful. But tell me a little bit about your journey into fantasy football. Was it first just a love of the sport that was like your gateway?
Yeah, I've been a football fan since I was 5 years old. I lived, my stepfather was in the Army, and so I lived in Germany, but from the time I was 5 till I was 8, and on base you had one American station, and on Sundays all that showed was football, right? So I became a Dallas Cowboys fan, much to the chagrin of the rest of my family because they all hated the Dallas Cowboys. But I liked the stars on their helmets. That's what appealed to a 5-year-old girl. And
Sure.
I went with it and I stuck with it. And they're like, you don't like the Dallas Cowboys. I'm like, yes, I do.
Of course.
So fell in love with the Cowboys. Then, the dynasty of the 90s just really kind of sealed the deal. Emmitt Smith, my favorite player of all time, just on and off the field, just the type of player that you love. And so became a football fan, and then started my career. I was a model. I was an actor first, and then started modeling when I was about 16 years old. Moved to New York, and it's hard to be a Dallas Cowboys fan in New York Giants land.
I would think so. Yeah.
It is hard to be a Dallas Cowboys fan, but I still made it work. Again, I'm competitive and I didn't care. So I'm like, you can hate me. It's fine. So was modeling, and then started acting again, and really that kind of took off for me. And then after the acting, I kind of got bored with that and started doing more hosting, TV hosting, and corporate spokesperson type thing. And I was hosting a women's sports talk show. And they said I'd always avoided fantasy football because I felt like it was going to ruin the game for me.
Sure.
That I would be worried more about the other players and not my own teams. Which I moved to Phoenix. I'm an Arizona Cardinals fan as well as a Dallas Cowboys fan now. And I was worried that it would ruin the game. And of course, as everybody that gets into fantasy football knows, it doesn't ruin the game. It makes it even better. Every game is now watchable.
Yes.
To a point. NFC East is kind of difficult right now. But every game is watchable. And so I fell in love with the game. I fell in love with the game of fantasy football and the fact that I got to make decisions. I got to pick and choose. And again, going back to that competitive spirit of I like winning at everything. And you're right. Board games, card games. Sports, I played softball growing up, and so I've been athletically competitive as well. So I just loved it, and so doing the TV hosting thing, it was actually my husband's idea. He was like, "Why don't you take what you love, fantasy football, and what you're good at, being on camera, and combine the two?" And I just started creating these little YouTube, segments, not very long. Just here's who my top 5 are this week. Here's who's in my doghouse. Here's who my stud of the week is, and gave that female perspective on it. So, and it was a voice that at the time, 5, 6, 7 years ago, wasn't heard as much in fantasy.
Yeah. That's kind of something that I've noticed too. I mean, I've been, I would say, active in the fantasy community at least the last 6 years. I was writing before, and then I got into podcasting just a couple years ago. But the space for women has grown so much in the very, very recent years. And it's been super fun to see all these women putting out amazing content. And then you see people across different platforms, from NFL Network to ESPN, getting so many amazing opportunities. I don't know if you saw the game where Mina Kimes got to commentate on the Rams game.
No, I missed it. But
It was probably some of my favorite moments of commentating, because obviously I feel like, there's moments in commentating where I think as just a football fan, you get a bit frustrated with a commentator. They just go down a rabbit hole that you're like, this doesn't even make sense right now. But she's just so funny that she just brought this extra element that you were just laughing the entire time that she's talking. Or if the guys were going off on a tangent, she would just bring them back with a quick joke. And it's just like, why don't we have more women doing this? It brings such a cool, balanced perspective to me to the game.
Well, I think that's why you're seeing a little bit more and a lot. And this is one of the things that I want to see women expand outside of this role, actually, the role of the moderator, right? We see a lot of female moderators in sports where you have all the guys going crazy, blah, 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 yelling at each other and going crazy. And the female is there to kind of go, all right, let's chill out. Let's get back to what we're supposed to talk to. But the female analyst is really important as well, the female perspective in that. And you're right, because we do, on DraftKings, it's all guys and me, and I'm not afraid to go after them. I'm not afraid, and they know it, and they're welcome to come after me too. If I'm saying stuff that does not make any sense, and if I'm saying stuff that is just flat out wrong, on it. But yeah, I'm not afraid to go after them, and most of the women that I know that do this aren't afraid to speak their mind and want their voices heard, because it is a different voice. It sounds different, both to the ears, but it sounds different in the content that comes out as well.
Absolutely. And I feel like we look at the game differently, because although I'm not going to speak for all women, because I absolutely would never try to do so. I mean, none of us technically played football. I haven't seen or heard an analyst that has, and I would love to hear that perspective from women that have played the game, because I know that there are plenty, and the number is growing.
Yeah,
and it's exciting to see them play. Fuller this past week for Vanderbilt, she was, it was just exciting to see her just there and active on the sidelines. Obviously, you want to see her in there and just kicking the ball all over the place. Game script dependent, I could see an amazing future for her. So hopefully Vanderbilt can get her out there more. But just for the perspective of the way we look at the game, obviously we look at it different, just because we didn't necessarily play it, but at the same time, coming from not just a fan's perspective, but really getting into the nitty gritty of the playmaking and then the routes, and then really seeing the dynamic between coaches. And I think that for me, as someone that comes from just a fan of the game and then into fantasy football, like you said, I was like, is this going to ruin it? Nope. Now I just love it 10 times more. And just getting to see individual players work in systems and seeing how those systems change, I think has been really fascinating, and, a perspective that I think needs to be heard more.
Yeah, it is. And let's not discount too the female intuition in things as well. Especially when it comes to fantasy. Now, I know, Cynthia Fralin does a great job with the technical analysis, right? The computer generated analysis. But there is something to be said for, I remember the beginning of the season, I am pretty tuned into Bruce Arians in the way that he does things from his time here in Arizona. And so when he's in Tampa Bay, there was the second or third week of the season, and everybody was on Ronald Jones. And there's a segment that we do on DraftKings called Working Up a Sweat. And it's, what have we kind of changed our mind on? This is towards the end of the show on Sundays. What have we changed our mind on that we're thinking, second guessing ourselves on? And so I said, this is, everybody's on Ronald Jones today because the matchup is really good, and I get it. But something in my gut tells me that we're going to see a lot of Leonard Fournette today, and not as much of Ronald Jones. Something that Bruce Arians had said just triggered something for me, and I was like, I think we're going to see a lot more Leonard Fournette, so get on Leonard Fournette. And sure enough, Fournette went off, and Rojo had 4 points. And so it was just, but it was a gut feeling. And I even said, I go, it's a gut feeling. So
take that with whatever you want to take it with.
But it was what my intuition told me. It was what I was, all the things, that gut feeling of, this is what's going to happen today. And sure enough, it did. So the intuition thing, don't discount that either.
Absolutely. I feel like, when it comes to intuition, I think it goes into that fight or flight instinct. And I feel like as females, we have really strong instincts when it comes to any of those things. We pick up on the tiny details, and guess what, guys? We don't forget them either. So we'll remember what they say weeks later. And
I think they know this. I think they know we don't forget.
Yeah, we don't forget either. So, we forget the stuff we want to forget. Like if we make a bad call, I'll forget that easy. Yeah. But I will remember what coaches say. That coach speak is so important. And I think that being able to read between the lines on things is something that I think that we can obviously bring to the analysis of the game, which makes it really fun.
Yeah, it's funny that you say coach speak, because I do know a number of analysts that I work with that are guys, and they are like, it's just coach speak. On Twitter, you'll hear them say, it's just coach speak. And I'm like, but are you listening? Because you can't discount coach speak, because they're saying something, and maybe they're not saying the exact words that are on the page, but there's an underlying meaning there that you need to listen to.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can hear it and then think one thing, be like, okay, I'll put it in the coach speak category. But then when you go back and you're like, okay, I was right on that gut instinct. And then you make these notes about these specific coaches and obviously the different schemes that they run. And maybe you'll have that instinct of, okay, yes, this seems like it's going to be a big Devontae Adams game, for example, like the game we've got tomorrow. And in one of my leagues, I'm going to be so bold as to start both Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams because I'm out Josh Jacobs. But my gut tells me a game that's going to have a bunch of receiving opportunities, I can see Jamal Williams having a great day. And
because he really is, I think that with Jamal Williams, he really is more so. Oh, my dog is whining. Hold on, please.
Yeah, no, you're good. Oh, puppy. Oh, look at her. Let me out.
Let me out. She's old now, and so she can't hear as well.
Oh, little thing.
But yeah, he really has become, I think, more of a wide receiver with none of those other receivers outside of maybe Tanyan is really that true number 2 to Devontae Adams. So Jamal Williams, there's definitely trust there, so I don't blame you.
No, for sure. And I think that with Rodgers specifically, it's when you look at quarterbacks and you think, okay, yes, this guy has so many weapons. So obviously he's going to be throwing to everyone. When you talk about someone like maybe Deshaun Watson, who does week to week utilize different guys every week and doesn't always just have that one guy. But when you look at someone like Rodgers, he has trust issues. Clearly, we've seen that. Time and time again. So I think you got to go with what you know, and you got to go with what Rodgers loves. And he loves guys that don't drop the ball.
Yes. Well, wouldn't you as a quarterback? I mean, let's
I would.
Logically. Are you going to throw the ball to a guy who consistently drops it? No, you're not. It makes you look bad.
Exactly. It makes you look like you're incompetent in the sense of like you're just trusting someone who you can't rely on. And it's like, oh no, it's going to change. And as far as, at least for women are concerned, for me, in my history, I have so many trust issues. I wouldn't throw to you ever again. Get off my team. Trade everyone.
I'm not throwing myself at you anymore. It's not happening because all you do is you keep dropping me.
Exactly. No 2 a.m. text from you, bud. No more.
No. But it's well, and you'll see, I mean, the opposite is true as well. Those guys that make you look better, right? The guys like Stephon Diggs, like, DK Metcalf, like DeAndre Hopkins, the people that you can throw anything in their vicinity. Des Bryant, back in the day. You can throw anything in their vicinity and they're going to catch it. So are you going to throw to that guy? Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to throw it near his bubble, near where I know his breath is, and I'm going to know that he's got the ball because, again, that's that trust thing with those players. So just a little bit more about DraftKings in this week. Obviously, you've got 8 leagues. I've got 10 leagues. We've got plenty of lineups to set, but we were talking before we went live. For me, by the time I've set those 10 leagues, I open up my DraftKings and I feel like I'm just staring at a blank piece of paper and I don't know where to go first because I just got people that I love that I want to start, and then I start throwing them together, and then my lineup is breaking the bank because I'm just throwing guys that I love. So when you're looking at a blank slate or walking someone through, novice, you can consider me for decent. I'm a novice at it. How do you begin to set that blank slate of a lineup week to week?
Well, I think number one, you have to decide what you're doing with cash games and what you're doing GPPs, right? Is with cash games and GPPs, cash games is where you want those guys with the solid floor, right? The guys that are going to score some points, and you might, so you're only going, that's like a head-to-head type of matchup. So with the tournaments, like the Millie Makers and things like that, that's where you're taking a little bit more risk. You want those guys with the higher ceilings, the ones that will, that just all of a sudden you see the Millie Maker, and there's always that one guy where you're like, how did that guy get on that guy? You know, and so you have to have some really, obvious choices in there, and then, you're going to have those guys that maybe other people just didn't think about, so there's something that is called the ownership, the percentage ownership. So in GPPs, that's where you want to kind of get away from the chalky guys, the guys that are heavily owned. There's some that you're gonna, what they call it, eat the chalk on, meaning there's some guys that you just can't get away from because you're going to pay the price on them. You're going to pay the chalk on them because they're going to score a lot of points, like Dalvin Cook this week. Dalvin Cook this week is going to score a lot of points. With Minnie, they're going against Jacksonville. We know Jacksonville is terrible against the running back. We know that Minnie does like to run the ball a lot. They need to get it in Dalvin Cook's hands. They've been throwing it a little bit more lately, but this is going to be a huge game for Dalvin Cook. Spoiler alert, he is my make it rain player for tomorrow. He's just going to go off. He's going to be in the 30s. And so you need those guys. Yeah. And you're going to pay up for them. That those are the guys you're going to pay up for because you know that they're going to cause you a lot of they're going to have a lot of points and they're going to be worth money. This week, somebody else that's going to be chalky but very cheap is Devontae Booker because of the Josh Jacobs injury and because of the Jets. But he may be somebody you can pull into your lineup and get a good amount of points from. I don't know if he's as money, if words, as Dalvin Cook's going to be, because you do know that Derek Carr can throw the ball too. He's got Waller in there. He's going to throw the ball against the Jets as well. So is he going to get you those 30 points? Maybe not, but for 5,500 to get 20 something points out of him, it's going to be good. So it is what you're going to do when you start setting your lineups is you're going to identify those guys that you have to have in your lineup this week and just work around that. So, and another thing is stacking players makes sense. You'll often see in these winning lineups, you'll see people stack their QB with a receiver or their running back with the defense, which I don't like that as much because in that case, you're assuming that it's going to be a low-scoring game, and I don't like to target low-scoring games for DFS. You want to target high-scoring games. Higher-scoring games produce more fantasy points. So I usually will do a quarterback with a receiver of some sort, or even if it's somebody like a Christian McCaffrey who both a receiver and a running back, stack that way as well.
So do you feel like you have lineups that maybe are heavy towards one team depending on the matchup then? Just if the matchup is just that good in that game?
I usually don't like to have more than 2 players in that game. I've seen people do 3, but I mean, there's only so many touchdowns to go around, and you need the targets, you need the receptions, you need the touchdowns as well. You can get, we saw, DK Metcalf have no touchdowns, but he had 10 catches for 170 something yards, right? So, but when you get it matched up like that with the touchdowns as well, the Tyreek Hill, situation, that's, that's obscene. That's a ridiculous example. It doesn't happen, but
no, but when it happens and it happens to you, like it did to me last week, you are just like sitting pretty.
Yeah, exactly. So the touchdowns are still important. I know a lot of people are like, touchdowns don't matter. That's 6 points. It's 6 points in one catch, which is 6 points, 7 points because of the catch plus whatever yardage there is, right? So it's a lot of points. You need the touchdowns too. So So I don't like stacking more than 2 players, and then maybe I'll bring it around with one player on the other side of that game, right?
Yeah.
So would I stack a Dalvin Cook with a Kirk Cousins because I know he's going to throw the ball a good amount, or do I even stack him with like a Justin Jefferson who's been really good and probably will be a little cheaper? So it just depends on what you get, and then bring that around with a DJ Chark, or I love James Robinson on the other side, but you got to think that Jacksonville is going to have to score a lot and they're going to have to throw the ball a lot to keep up with the Minnesota offense. So I'd probably go with a wide receiver there as opposed to James Robinson.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. We actually got a really interesting question here from Kyle Senra, who I appreciate so much, Kyle. He's got this great DFS one for you. As we're talking about building these lineups, I think this is a great question.
Yeah.
He said the Browns and Titans game currently has the highest over-under of the week. Does that make Henry Chubb a good running back stack?
You know, it absolutely is, but it's going to be expensive for you, right? So it really depends. I mean, Derrick Henry is matchup proof at this point. Chubb still is going to have to split time with Hunt, you know, and we can see he's still fantasy relevant, absolutely. And he's still going to give you, but when you look at the difference in price, the difference in price is interesting because Dalvin Cook is the number one running back on the slate. Derrick Henry is the number 2 running back on the slate. Nick Chubb is number 3, but there is a $1,500 difference between Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry. There's only my glasses aren't on at the moment, $300 difference between Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook. It's $9,200 for Derrick Henry, but we saw him go off last week against a very good defense. What's he going to do against this Cleveland defense that is terrible against the run?
Yeah.
He's going to be pretty good. So we actually talked about this. It's funny enough last week on Monday about, you know, do you stack these guys? And I don't know if I would stack them, quite honestly. And it really has everything to do with the fact that Derrick Henry, you know, is going to get all the touches. You know, he's going to be heavily involved. You know, with Chubb to have back-to-back great games, I don't know that it's going to happen. I don't think Chubb is going to have an awful game whatsoever, but to pay up for the third highest, I think you have to pick one of those guys. I'm not going with both of them.
No, doesn't sound like so bold, but would you necessarily then, we were talking about Jamal Williams, then does the Derrick Henry with a Jamal Williams sound like a good price point for opportunity?
For opportunity, you know, again, I'd probably still go maybe Devontae Booker. Although Devontae Booker will have, you know, he is involved in the pass game, but there's still 2 other running backs back there. It's not like the situation where, I mean, Derrick Henry is not involved in the pass game at all.
No.
You know? So, but he still is so valuable because he gets the touchdown rushes. He's a bowling ball and he can break off huge runs, just like Nick Chubb can. So I don't hate the Jamal Williams thing, but it's a risk. It's an absolute risk because he could get blanked a little bit there.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to get nothing.
Yeah.
But you look at Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is 7,200. So I probably, you know, if you're, I don't mind if you do Aaron Jones. I don't know. I'd have to look at it if I do Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams in DFS. I mean, Jamal Williams is still $6,100. That
sounds like a lot
for someone that's averaging 11 fantasy points per game. I think you could probably get somebody around the $6,100 mark that's going to have more, like even a Boston Scott. He's still getting 7.2 fantasy points per game. Latavius Murray is there at about 5,900 going against Atlanta. But I think last week was the huge game for him. So usually we don't see guys in that secondary role have monster games back to back. I would pivot a little bit more towards Jonathan Taylor coming back. Jonathan Taylor's only 5,700 going against Houston.
Yeah.
And they do want him to be a big part of that game. They do want him to be that lead back kind of guy. And we've seen him have some really, really good games. And so at that 5,700 price point, that's a pretty good one. And I don't know that he's going to be chalky. So I might go that direction if I'm going like a Derrick Henry on the other end.
That makes sense. And then maybe, with David Montgomery, he's in like that 5K range as well.
Yeah,
is Montgomery even someone that you would mess around with?
You can definitely. It's a risk. It's a risk trusting Chicago's run game. And
trusting Chicago alone, crying out loud.
doesn't, unfortunately, outside of Allen Robinson, the beauty of Allen Robinson is, he's getting the targets. That, so that's points. That's points that you're going to get. His floor is so high because he's going to get the targets, especially now with Trubisky back in there, right?
Yeah.
So David Montgomery, I have him in a number of season-long leagues, and it's so hard to trust him. It's just the Bears just don't score a lot of points, and you need the touchdowns out of your running backs, especially if they're not catching a lot of the pass game opportunity as well. Which even with Tariq Cohen out, he's not a lot, to get a couple. We're talking. You want Alvin Kamara type numbers, You
do.
McKissick, who is like, he's been tooled back a little bit. They're trying to get Antonio Gibson a little bit more into that CMC type of role with Washington, and I like it. I like it a lot. I think Antonio Gibson is fantastic. So. And I have him in a number of season-long leagues. So I keep loving the uppage of usage of him. So, Montgomery is good as that second RB because the matchup is so good. But I just worry about the touchdown upside.
No, I get that for sure. I feel like, we all started obviously this 2020 season with something in mind as far as what we were going to get. And we didn't know exactly how many top players were going to be out so early. And I think that was something we were all kind of trying to re-navigate the waters on. Were there players that you had going into the season that are still doing well? Or do you feel like, or are you in the boat where like some of us are, where all of our top calls just went down? Like, I have my ride or dies. My ride or die is and always forever will be Aaron Jones. I mean, till the end of time, he's my ride or die. But
it's amazing how late he went too.
Right.
He was second in the league in terms of fantasy points per game last season. And I got him in a number of leagues late second round.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, like I have.
Thank you.
Where I was the first pick. I got Christian McCaffrey, Julio Jones, and Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
On that second, third round turn.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed. And that's the league that, even though Christian McCaffrey's been out except for 2 games so far this season, Julio Jones has been in and out. And I did lose Aaron Jones a number of games as well this season. But I was still 10-0. I've lost the last 2 games, but I was 10-0 because now I've also lost Drew Brees, and Tom Brady is on a bye this week. So I am, believe it or not, I am starting Alex Smith in that. It's a super flex league, and I'm starting Alex Smith in that league, and it hurts. It's painful. I mean, I love it. Alex Smith, yay, Alex
Smith.
Yeah,
absolutely. Coming back from that injury, we all want to see him play, but in our fantasy teams, we want a little bit.
In that league are very happy that I'm missing now. I mean, I've been in and out without Christian McCaffrey and without Julio Jones quite a bit this season.
Yeah.
And Aaron Jones, again, missing him. And now I'm out Drew Brees the past few weeks. So I lost the last 2 games, but I'll still win that league. No big deal.
Oh yeah, 110%. I mean, it sounds like you're gonna kill it. I mean, it's funny though. My one league I have Aaron Jones. I also have Julio in. My only saving grace in that league is that I did snag Chase Claypool in our rookie draft, and so that was just saving grace there. And I've got Robert Woods, so I've got my boys over at receiver that are being my solid, consistent guys. Yeah. Thank God. But with Julio, what makes me nervous about being an owner of him going into playoffs is I'm going to get to a point with him where I'm not, even if they say he's healthy, I'm not going to want to start him just because I've seen that hamstring seize up mid-game, and I'm like, I need you to finish the game, bro.
And it's so hard. It's so hard to sit somebody like a Julio Jones, though, because he can play through injury too. You've seen him do both.
You've done it. Mm-hmm.
You've seen him do both. So it depends. I always say, if Julio's playing, I'm playing him. I can't. I have to trust the rest of my roster. And this is where people come in and they go, what do I do? Hopefully you've built the rest of your roster that you can trust them, because not everybody is going to have that solid game every week. It's just not going to happen unless you're Christian McCaffrey. But not everybody's going to have that. So hopefully you've built the rest of your roster to where if Julio doesn't have a good game, you're going to be okay. You know, again, you can be okay. I mean, I've got Cole Beasley on that, who is a rock star.
Yes.
He's
such a sneaky, amazing receiver this season. And then even like into week 5, everyone's like, really? You're starting Cole Beasley? It's like, have you been watching the games? Talk about a floor.
Yeah.
I mean, he's starting on the second floor, crying out loud. Like, he's got such a high floor with Josh Allen. So, I mean, there's just those sneaky plays that this year, I mean, I feel bad for Cole Beasley because I don't want to say it's not that he's just not a sexy player, but he's not a player that you drafted very high for.
No. I got him in the end of drafts, you know, and the end of long drafts. But Cole Beasley is consistent from the time he was in Dallas. You know, these slot receivers, those are the ones that are sneaky because they're the cute little dump off guys. It was funny. We called him he's a dude. You know, he's a dude. He just gets in there. He gets it done. And his hair flies out the back of his helmet. And it's not pretty, but it gives you points. And that's really all I care about.
Yeah, all we care about are the points. Is there someone that in maybe multiple DraftKings lineups tomorrow that you know that you're slotting in there? Is that Dalvin Cook for you?
It's a Dalvin Cook. So when you look at, you know, again, there are times when you just have to understand that this guy is going to be in the winning lineup. You have to play him. You know, it is a lot of times the Devontae Adams too. But, you know, it's the Dalvin Cooks, it's the Christian McCaffreys, it's a lot of the running backs. Running backs are, because it's such a shallow position, much like tight end. Sometimes you have to pay up for the tight end because a lot of times you have to pay up for the tight end, but tight ends aren't super expensive unless they're Travis Kelce, you know. But and Waller's kind of getting to that position as well. Last week took him down a notch because he had a great
match. It was such a brutal game.
Oh God, it was terrible. Derek Carr just killed me.
No, I know. And I think a lot of us were really high on him before that game. Oh, this is shaping up to just be a high volume game. And everyone was predicting this, like, oh, clearly this is just gonna be a high scoring game. Carr's on a roll, and then it just like hit a complete wall and just crumbled in front of us.
Yeah. And the best thing to do is not listen to that hype when you're taking your DraftKings lineup into consideration, because that hype means they're going to be heavily owned. And they're going to be heavily owned. I'd rather, like, if you would have not listened to the hype, because Kansas City had a tough matchup last week, right? Yeah. I mean, it was not an ideal situation. So Tyreek Hill going off like that, if you would have just trusted the stud that is Tyreek Hill and been like, okay, everybody's going over here, I'm just going to go to somebody I trust. When you were talking earlier about who are those guys that you're just like, that's my guy. That is my guy. I'm always going to have him. You know, Alvin Kamara has been that guy, right? That is my guy. He's had he had a great beginning of the season. Taysom Hill came in and things are a little different right now, but I think we expected that. Michael Thomas was that guy, right? Last year. It was just, you know, that they're always going to be good. They're always going to be expensive for you, but they're just those guys that are worth it. So when you see that, when you see everybody going to the latest, greatest thing, like remember Travis Fulgham, that everybody was like crazy about him. Denzel Mims, everybody's crazy about him. And like, you're talking about a Jets offense right now with Denzel Mims. You're talking about the Jets. Why is this exciting to you?
We still all know where we're at right now, right? Like, it's like, the food's great here. Yeah, but we're still like in the middle of a crappy city. Like, this isn't going to change the fact that we're eating this here. It's sushi. Yeah, but it's sushi here in the middle of nowhere. Like, there's no ocean anywhere. What are we going to do? Like,
we've got some great sushi here.
Although I know that Phoenix has good sushi. I lived there for a time, so I do know that you guys have good sushi. But it's closer. As far as, like, proximity, it's not super far. It's not like...
It's not Midwest sushi.
Or like, I was gonna say like Iowa sushi. I would not trust. No offense to Iowa, been there too. Great cornfields.
Beef there is fantastic.
Exactly. No, you gotta know your place, know your situation.
Yeah. So there are certain guys that are just, so when you hear like a lot of hype around a certain guy, maybe pivot off that guy, because especially if it's not like the solid guy. Dalvin Cook's going to have a lot of hype around him, but people are not going to want to pay the price for him. So,
Sure.
is the ownership going to be high? Yeah, it's probably going to be high. Is it going to be the highest? Are they all going to own him? Probably not, because again, it's who's willing to pay the price.
Absolutely. So week to week, where can everyone get some of these amazing nuggets of knowledge that you've just dropped on everyone here today? Where can people go to just find more?
Find more. Where is more of that Rosalie girl?
Yes.
I'm always accessible on Twitter at Rosalie Michaels. So when it's Rosalie, you see it there on the screen. At Rosalie Michaels. I'm always accessible there, but try to get your questions into me before Sunday morning. Sunday morning, that's where else you can find me on DraftKings The Sweat. And I'm in Phoenix, so we start at 9:30 a.m. and go right up till game time here in Phoenix. At 11 a.m. is when first game starts. During the second part of the season, because we in Phoenix don't change our clocks. So we don't do that daylight savings time thing. We're like, nah, we're good.
I wish that California would just get on with that, because
the entire nation.
I'm over it. I'm over this daylight savings. Messes me up every year.
But yeah, so you can catch me on DraftKings, on their YouTube channel, on Twitter, on Facebook. And if you are back east, we are live on a couple of stations, SNY Network and one of the, I don't know, I guess I don't pay attention to everywhere it airs, but yeah, you can always see it online.
That's fantastic. I just know that, and I want to make sure people know to be looking for your content, because you're such a great Twitter follow and you're always giving out great advice and just such a fun follow. So if you guys are not following Rosalie, please fix that now. Go follow at Rosalie Michaels on Twitter and throw those DFS questions her way, but promptly, because we want to make sure that she's able to do her amazingness on Sundays. So get those questions in.
I want to be able to answer it for you guys. And I feel so bad when they ask questions during the show. And quite honestly, during the show, I don't have time to answer any questions. We do answer questions live on the air, though. The hosts will ask us questions. So if you guys put those questions in the chat, one of us will answer it. It might not be me, but the other guys, they're fantastic too. So.
They're fantastic. I mean, we hopefully everyone agrees. I know when we do our start sits on Sunday mornings, we try and go around the table and answer questions quickly, or we literally just answer questions Sunday mornings. Yeah. And it can feel like, a fire to get through. But there's times when all of a sudden we hit a wall because all of us disagree and we're like, well, that didn't help anyone asking this question.
Well, yeah, they usually just have one of us answer the question pretty rapid fire to help you guys out.
For sure. You want that concise, just like, no, this guy, just get him in. Just get him in there. Because when people are asking those questions Sunday, those Sunday questions, they're just in a panic. So you just got to hit the buzzer on that real quick. But thank you so much for taking the time to just chat football with me. Obviously, just grateful to have the moment to get to know you a little bit more, have the viewers and listeners get to know you a little bit more so they can get to know more of your amazing content.
Oh, thank you guys. It was a pleasure. We got to do this again, Sam. We'll go
Absolutely.
ahead and have more beverages.
Yes, I'm going to hit end broadcast, but we're going to share a drink and have another moment together off air. So you guys have a wonderful Saturday. Tune in again to Fantasy Focus tomorrow morning, and tune into all the amazing content that Rosalie has put out there and on DraftKings tomorrow on The Sweat. Get those DFS questions answered. Get yourself some wins. Have a great week 13, everyone.